Max Payne is a video game series well known for its intense shootouts with a trademark slow motion, allowing you to dive around, killing enemies in style. Hard Bullet is an upcoming VR shooter that features high intensity shootouts with a slow motion, allowing you to jump and dive around, killing enemies in style. See? It isn't clickbait. There's no release date for Hard Bullet, but I got access to the closed beta, and while it still feels early in the game's development, there's actually a lot of potential. I'm going to go over what's currently in the game, and I'm going to give my thoughts on where the developer should take the game to release that potential. Let's start with what's already there. It uses full physics for your in-game hands, weapons, and other items in the world. Your hand will collide with objects in the game, guns will collide with other guns. It's all what we've come to expect from a modern VR game. There's some light destruction, so when you shoot around the environment, some things will fly off, sparks will fly when the bullets make impact, and there's a really cool smoke effect that comes from the barrel of the gun. The game's got gore, which has some really nice blood effects with blood flying into the air, and it splatters onto the wall and the surrounding environment. You can even blow people's heads off. As already mentioned, the game has a slow motion feature, which you can activate at any point. You can also dive left or right and jump, allowing you to do some stylish dives off the top balcony or diving sideways through a door. The bullets have a really cool trace effect as they fly through the air, and when you add up all the gore, smoke effects, destruction, sparks and bullet effects, it all adds up to a really stylish looking game, especially in slow motion. It helps the guns to feel powerful, which is also helped by the fast time to kill. There's a good range of weapons with some pistols, one-handed submachine guns, assault rifles and shotguns. You've got two different reload types with an arcade and a realistic mode. The arcade mode simply requires you to lower your hands down to your waist and then back up again. Realistic mode requires the usual, so remove the empty magazine, insert a new one and rack a slide in the chamber if it's empty. There's no recoil right now, with the game clearly designed around the arcade style reload. The enemies come at you thick and fast with limited cover, so there's no real time to manually reload. You have to keep moving, diving and jumping around, and dual wielding is definitely encouraged. They've even got two assault rifles with the stock removed, so that you can handle them one in each hand. I personally prefer realistic manual reloading, so the levels will need to be designed to allow that, which I'll talk more about later. There are 4 enemy types, so you've got some that come at you with a baton, some that have got no armour with guns, some have bulletproof vests which take more shots, and then you've got a heavy guy with some big armour. Right now they're really aggressive, they'll come straight for you. The guys who are wearing armour will actually get knocked down with a couple of hits, but won't be dead, which I really liked. There are 2 modes available in this beta. You've got a wave mode and survival. They're pretty self-explanatory. I'm not sure exactly what the developers got planned in terms of actual content, but I've got some ideas and suggestions, so let's move on to the feedback. Game design is difficult. Not just making the game look good or play well, but all the smaller design decisions and details make a huge difference, and that's what I want to focus on. I'm going to talk about reloading, ammo, slow motion, enemies and the level design. Let's get back to talking about reloading. I've already mentioned that the game feels like it's designed around the arcade method, and they obviously want to encourage players to play with style and dual wield. I think having both options is a good idea, as some people don't like having to manually reload, and some people refuse to play a game that doesn't allow you to reload manually. I personally prefer manual reloading because it adds an extra layer of depth to the gameplay. You have to think about your movement more, making sure you've got cover available if you think you're going to need to reload mid-gunfight. Going through the action of ejecting a magazine and slotting in a new one feels really satisfying. Even after over 25 hours of playing Half-Life Alyx, reaching over my shoulder and slotting in a new mag still feels great. It requires skill, with you having to learn how each gun works, and as you get better at it, you can reload the gun really quickly. With the arcade style, you're simply just lowering and raising your hands, which requires no skill. Even my grandma could do it, and you don't have to think about cover as much, reducing the gameplay to just running around constantly pulling the triggers. In the beta, you have infinite ammo. I assume that this is just for the beta so they can test things out, but I do see a lot of games that end up giving you way too much ammo. I played some custom levels on Half-Life Alyx recently that didn't give you loads of ammo, so you really had to pick your shots, and sometimes you would have to move during a gunfight to try and grab some ammo from a dead body. It made a surprising difference to the feel of the game, and making sure the player doesn't always have loads of ammo for every gun adds another layer of depth to the gameplay. Restricting the types of ammo you get could also be used to force you to have to switch to different guns, again forcing the player to have to switch up the playstyle, making the gameplay feel more dynamic. One possible solution to dual wielding with manual reloading would be to make sure the enemies drop a gun for you to pick up when you kill them. If the gun's fully loaded, this way you can kill an enemy, grab their gun with your other hand, dual wield with both guns, and then when you run out of ammo you could throw it at the enemy, which would stagger them, giving you a chance to reload your main gun and finish them off. As mentioned a couple of times, the game does use some slow motion. It allows you to jump and dive around Max Payne style. Right now it's infinite. There needs to be some sort of cooldown period. Obviously don't put a HUD up there, maybe have some sort of watch letting you know how much slow motion you've got. Having to pick and choose when to use the slow motion adds yet another layer of depth to the gameplay. The difficulty should be challenging to the point where you need to use the slow motion at times to survive. It needs to be balanced into the gameplay rather than just being there because it looks cool. Moving on to enemies, I've already mentioned there are 4 types currently in the game. I like that they've got a good variety, but the behaviour of the enemies needs to be different. The melee enemies with the batons would rush you, and the heavy armoured guys would hold back and shoot from a distance. The in-between classes would be somewhere in between, keeping you on your toes but giving you some space allowing you to get behind cover and reload. Having the 4 types of enemies that act differently would allow you to fine-tune each gunfight to feel different, and you could alter the flow and pacing of the fight depending on the combination of enemies and where they're coming from. Lastly, I want to talk about level design. Like I mentioned, I'm not sure exactly what the developers have planned for the game, but if it's going to be a wave shooter with different areas, then it's dead on arrival in my opinion. People don't want wave shooters anymore. The game needs to be point-to-point levels that you need to work your way through, getting into gunfights along the way. The game needs to have different levels that you progress through, which gradually get harder, introduce new weapons and enemy types, keep things fresh. I've actually got an idea for a game, and I think this style would fit it perfectly. The idea is to have a building with multiple levels, and each level of the building is a level of the game. As you climb up to the top, the game gradually gets harder, with your goal to reach the top floor and finish off with some sort of boss type encounter. Think of films like The Raid or the most recent Dread film. You'd start in the car park, or parking lot for you Americans, with a pistol, facing off against some low-level security guards who also have pistols. Once you've cleared them out, you can move into the building, and you could have a gunfight in a lobby, recreating the famous lobby scene from The Matrix, with tiled floors, walls and pillars that you can take cover behind. There's a couple of elevators at the end with waves of enemies coming out that get harder. You can really lean into that destruction with pieces of tile and concrete flying everywhere. It would be pretty epic. Once you've cleared out all the waves, you go into the elevator up to the first floor of the building. This next level could be more open. Maybe you'd have a canteen area and somewhere that visitors come to sit down and relax. You want to gradually introduce different weapons as you progress and build the levels around those weapons. For example, you could have a level built around the shotgun where you have a series of rooms you have to breach and clear, keeping the encounters close. Another level could have a guy with a minigun up high pinning you down. You have to fend off melee enemies trying to rush you and keep pushing forward from cover to cover while the minigun guy has to wait for it to cool down. Eventually you get to the end, take him out, it then switches with you then using the minigun taking out a few waves of enemies trying to rush you. You could have a level with a helicopter that keeps trying to gun you down through the windows. You have to push inside rooms taking out enemies whilst having the helicopter keep popping up forcing you to have to run. You finish off with a rocket launcher and take it out. There could be a sniper level, where snipers from the building across the road are trying to take you out. You have to keep out of sight at first, but then you get a sniper rifle allowing you to pick them off. Getting the pacing right, switching up the levels and the way you play to keep things fresh is really important and obviously will need lots of playtesting. Anyway, that's enough from me. If you've got any ideas or feedback for the developers, then leave a comment as they will see this. Also, according to statistics, if I ask you to like and subscribe, you're more likely to do it. So do it, if you want.